Rennick Vale had seen three kinds of beautiful places in his years as a colonial forces soldier: the kind that wanted to kill you, the kind that had already killed someone else, and the kind that made you forget, just for a moment, that you were very far from home. The observatory on Cythera's palace qualified as all three. He stood at the entrance, still wearing his dress uniform that smelled faintly of the recycled air from the transport shuttle, and stared up at the crystalline dome that seemed to hold the entire universe in its curved embrace. Three moons hung in perfect alignment beyond the glass, each a different shade of silver, casting intersecting shadows across marble floors, so polished they looked like frozen water. The stars were different here than on Earth, arranged in constellations that told stories he'd never learned as a child. He'd spent 6 months on this moon and still couldn't shake the feeling that the sky itself was upside down. A court official with neural implants flickering at his temples gestured impatiently for Rennick to proceed. Standard protocol for a reward ceremony, they'd told him. Medal, maybe a promotion, definitely some flowery speech about valor and service. He'd been through 4 of these already on different worlds. They all blurred together after a while, except this one had Queen Isolene waiting at its center, and that changed everything. She stood beneath the dome's apex where the light from all 3 moons converged, wearing a gown of such deep black it seemed to pull the surrounding starlight into itself. Her skin was pale as old ivory, her hair cascading down her back in waves that someone had woven through with platinum chains that caught and fractured the moonlight. But it was her ears that caught his attention, as they always did. Long and elegant, sweeping back from her temples in graceful points that marked her as something not quite human, though close enough to make the differences haunting rather than alien. She was surrounded by her court, arranged in careful hierarchies that Rennick had learned to read like tactical formations. The prime minister with her silver-threaded hair, the military commander with his collection of service medals that would have made a lesser man's spine collapse, various nobles and officials whose names Rennick had memorized and would probably forget by morning, and 3 women standing in a separate cluster, clearly set apart for some purpose, each beautiful in distinctly different ways. The Queen's dark eyes found him as he approached, and something flickered there. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. 3 days ago, he'd been diving across her transport's cargo bay, tackling her out of the path of a plasma bolt that would have vaporized her head. Before that, he'd been the soldier who made her smile during a strategy briefing when he'd observed that the rebel commander they were facing had clearly learned tactics from watching very bad action holos. Before that, a dozen other small moments scattered across the campaign like stars across the void. "Soldier Rennick Vale," she said, her voice carrying across the observatory with the kind of projection that came from years of addressing crowds. "You have served the fractured realms with distinction. You saved my convoy from rebel forces, demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness, and showed courage under fire that honors your posting." Rennick stood at attention, trying not to notice how the starlight caught the curve of her cheekbone, the way her long ears shifted slightly when she spoke. A micro-expression he'd learned meant she was keeping her real feelings carefully controlled. "As is our custom," the Queen continued, turning to gesture at the 3 women, "when a soldier performs an act of extraordinary service, we offer a reward commensurate with the deed. Before you stand 3 noble women of the fractured realms, each willing to bond with you in an alliance that would bring you into our court, elevate your status, and bind you to our service through marriage." Well, Rennick thought distantly, that was unexpected. The medal idea was looking pretty good right about now. The first woman stepped forward at the Queen's gesture. She wore armor even to this ceremony, ceremonial but still functional, with a plasma blade at her hip that hummed with barely contained energy. "Lady Karaith," the Queen introduced, "victor of the Singing Canyons campaign, master of 17 forms of combat, holder of the Crimson Star." Lady Karaith offered a smile that suggested she found the entire proceeding mildly amusing and was trying to decide if Rennick would be entertaining. Her ears, shorter than the Queen's but still distinctly pointed, tilted forward with interest. The second woman was smaller, her temples studded with neural enhancement implants that pulsed with soft blue light. "Scholar Vane," the Queen said, "expert in quantum mechanics and historical linguistics, author of the Treaty of Divided Stars, architect of our new trade language protocols." Scholar Vane's expression was analytical, like she was already calculating the socio-political implications of various choices. Rennick had the distinct feeling she'd have charts prepared. The third woman moved with the fluid grace of someone trained in diplomacy as performance art. Diplomat Ashran, the Queen finished. Her family controls three of our most vital trade routes, and her negotiations ended the Corridor War without a single additional casualty. Diplomat Ashran inclined her head with perfect courtesy, her long ears adorned with rings that marked her family status. She looked like someone who'd never made an awkward gesture in her life. Rennick tried to focus on the three noble women, tried to imagine choosing one, tried to engage with the political theater he'd apparently stumbled into. But his eyes kept drifting back to the Queen, to the way she held herself with such careful control, to the memory of her standing alone on her flagship's observation deck at 3 in the morning, studying star charts with an exhaustion she thought no one could see. He remembered handing her a cup of terrible synthesized coffee, remembered her surprised laugh when she tasted it, remembered her saying, "This is poison, Soldier Vale." Remembered answering, "Yes, Your Majesty, but it's warm poison." Remembered the smile that had transformed her face for just a moment before duty pulled it back into careful neutrality. The Queen's voice brought him back to the present. "You may take time to deliberate, Soldier Vale. This is a significant choice. Each lady brings different strengths, different alliances, different futures." His commanding officer, standing somewhere in the crowd, was probably having an aneurysm. This was the kind of opportunity soldiers dreamed about: instant elevation, political protection, a life beyond the infantry. The smart choice was obvious. Ask respectful questions. Weigh the options. Choose strategically. Rennick had never been particularly good at smart choices. He raised his hand. The movement felt inevitable, like gravity or the turning of planets. His finger extended, pointing past Lady Caraith's amused smile, past Scholar Vane's analytical gaze, past Diplomat Ashran's perfect courtesy, straight at Queen Iselin herself. "Her," he said, his voice steady despite the way his heart was trying to escape his chest. "I choose her." The silence that followed was the kind that precedes explosions. The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Rennick watched it detonate in slow motion across the Queen's face. First incomprehension, her dark eyes widening slightly as if the translation circuits in her neural lace had glitched. Then recognition, sharp and sudden, as she understood exactly what he'd said and precisely what it meant. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Rennick had seen Queen Iselin negotiate the surrender of a warlord without blinking. He'd watched her deliver a eulogy for 200 soldiers with perfect composure. He'd observed her redirect an entire battle strategy in real time, while plasma fire lit up the sky around her transport. He had never, not once, seen her speechless. Her pale face flushed, color rising from her neck to her cheeks in a way that made her seem suddenly, startlingly human, despite the elegant ears now pressed back against her skull. Her hands, which had been folded in regal serenity before her, separated. One rose part way, fingers extending as if to gesture or perhaps to strangle him, then fell uselessly back to her side. Somewhere behind him, someone dropped something glass. The sound of it shattering on marble rang through the observatory like a bell tolling for his execution. The court erupted. Not loudly, these were trained nobles after all, but in a wave of whispers that built like static electricity before a lightning strike. Neural implants flickered faster as messages flew through the palace's quantum network. Hands moved toward weapons. The Prime Minister's silver-threaded hair seemed to stand on end, though that might have been Rennick's imagination. Lady Caraith made a sound. Rennick's combat training identified it as a laugh, quickly bitten off but unmistakable. When he risked a glance sideways, she was grinning like someone who'd just watched a rookie soldier try to arm wrestle a combat mech. Scholar Vane's expression had shifted from analytical to fascinated, her neural implants pulsing rapidly as she no doubt cataloged this breach of protocol for future study. Diplomat Ashran looked like she'd swallowed something toxic, her perfect composure cracking into what could only be described as diplomatic horror. The royal guards moved first, 2 of them, flanking the Queen, their plasma rifles humming to active status with a sound like angry wasps. The energy buildup made Rennick's skin prickle. He'd been shot at enough times to recognize the sensation of being in someone's sights. The Queen's hand rose again, this time with purpose. The gesture was minimal, barely a twitch of her fingers, but the guards froze instantly. Their weapons stayed active but didn't aim. Yet, Rennick's commanding officer, a man named Torrens who'd survived 3 wars and had been trying to survive this posting until retirement, had gone the color of Sathera's rust-colored sand. He looked like he was aging in real time, like every second that passed was adding years to his service record and subtracting years from his life expectancy. But Rennick kept his eyes on the Queen. She'd taken one step forward, her black gown flowing around her like liquid shadow. Her long ears had shifted position again, pulled back and slightly down in what he'd learned was intense emotional processing. The platinum chains in her hair chimed softly with the movement. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, careful, dangerous. "You presume much, Soldier Vale." There was a tremor beneath the ice, though. Barely perceptible, the kind of thing you'd only hear if you'd spent months learning the subtle variations in her tone, memorizing the difference between her command voice and her tired voice and the voice she used when she thought no one important was listening. Rennick could have apologized, could have claimed temporary insanity, blamed it on lingering combat stress, suggested the moon's lower gravity had affected his judgment, could have thrown himself on the court's mercy and begged for a quick execution instead of a slow one. Instead, he smiled. Not mockingly, not nervously, but with genuine warmth, the same smile he'd given her when she'd appeared on the observation deck at 3 in the morning and found him already there. And they'd shared that terrible coffee in comfortable silence while the stars wheeled overhead. "Your Majesty offered me a choice," he said. "I chose honestly." Something happened to the Queen's face. The careful mask she wore cracked further, fractures spreading across her composure like ice under pressure. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half something else entirely. Something that might have been a gasp or might have been his name started and stopped. "You chose suicide," she said, but there was no conviction in the words. They came out almost wondering, like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't balance. Behind him, Lady Craith wasn't even trying to hide her grin anymore. She'd shifted her weight into a relaxed stance, one hand resting on her plasma blade's hilt, watching the scene unfold with the appreciation of someone who recognized a bold tactical maneuver when she saw one. Scholar Vane had tilted her head, her neural implants creating complex patterns as she processed the social dynamics at play. Diplomat Ashran had recovered enough of her composure to step backward gracefully, removing herself from the immediate blast radius. The 3 noblewomen were reading the room, and what they were reading was apparently very interesting. The Prime Minister cleared her throat, a sound like grinding gears. "Your Majesty, protocol demands—" "I am aware of protocol, Prime Minister." The Queen cut her off without looking away from Rennick. Her dark eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that should have been terrifying, but somehow wasn't. "I wrote half of it." More whispers rippled through the court. The military commander had moved closer to Torrens, probably to discuss exactly how they were going to execute the soldier who just committed career suicide by complimenting the Queen in the most catastrophically inappropriate way possible. But the Queen hadn't ordered his death, hadn't called for the guards to remove him, hadn't done any of the things protocol demanded when someone broke rank this spectacularly. She just stood there, frozen beneath the crystalline dome, with the light of 3 moons painting her in silver, staring at Rennick like he was a puzzle she'd been trying to solve for months and had just realized the answer to. Her expression cycled through emotions faster than he could name them. Outrage, confusion, something that might have been fear, something else that made his breath catch because it looked almost like hope. "The ceremony," the Prime Minister tried again, "requires a selection from the offered—" "Everyone out," the Queen said quietly. The observatory went silent again. This was a different silence, though. This one tasted like ozone before a storm. "Your Majesty," the Prime Minister protested, "this is unprecedented. The ceremony must be witnessed." "I said—" The Queen's voice dropped to a register that Rennick had only heard once before, when she'd given the order to fire on the rebel position that had her convoy pinned down. It was the voice of someone who'd ruled for 15 years and survived 7 assassination attempts and was done explaining herself. "Everyone, out!" The court moved. Nobles and officials filed toward the exits with varying degrees of haste and backward glances. The 3 noble women departed with notably different energies. Karaith still grinning, Vane already dictating notes into her neural recorder, Ashrin moving with the fluid grace of someone escaping a natural disaster. Torrens caught Rennick's eye as he passed, his expression communicating an entire conversation. "What have you done, you absolute idiot? I cannot protect you from this. I hope you have a very good explanation. I'm going to need so much alcohol after this." The guards were the last to leave, reluctant, their weapons still humming. The Queen dismissed them with a flick of her fingers. The doors sealed with a hydraulic hiss that sounded remarkably final. The silence that filled the observatory after the doors sealed was the kind that had weight. Rennick could feel it pressing against his eardrums, could hear his own heartbeat amplified in the absence of court whispers and nervous shuffling. Above them, the 3 moons continued their slow dance across the crystalline dome, indifferent to the small human drama playing out below. Queen Iseline hadn't moved. She stood in the pool of converging moonlight, her black gown absorbing the silver radiance, her face still cycling through expressions she probably hadn't allowed herself to show in years. Her long ears twitched once, twice, a nervous gesture he'd never seen from her before. Rennick waited. His military training had taught him when to advance and when to hold position. This was definitely a hold position moment. "Do you," the Queen began, then stopped. Started again. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Committed professional suicide, violated about 17 protocols, probably started 3 different political scandals, and given Scholar Vane enough material for at least 2 academic papers?" Rennick offered. "I may have missed a few." The Queen's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it wasn't not a smile either, and Rennick decided to count that as a victory even if it turned out to be his last one. "You forgot treason," she said. "Pointing at a reigning monarch in a formal ceremony could technically be construed as threatening gestures toward the crown. Is that before or after the unauthorized proposal of marriage to said monarch?" "That's not—" The Queen's composure cracked further. She pressed one hand to her temple, fingers sliding along the elegant curve of her ear. "You didn't propose marriage. You simply chose. This isn't. I don't even know what this is." "Well, technically you said I could choose," Rennick pointed out, keeping his voice gentle. "You didn't specify I had to choose from the approved options. That's a loophole big enough to fly a cargo transport through." The Queen made a sound somewhere between a laugh and something that might have been a sob if she were the kind of person who sobbed, which she definitely wasn't. She turned away from him, moving to the edge of the observatory where the window opened onto Sithara's landscape. The rust-colored dunes stretched to the horizon, dotted with the bioluminescent plants that made the moon's surface glow faintly in the darkness. "You're enjoying this," she said to the window. "I'm terrified," Rennick admitted. "But yes, a little. Your face when I pointed at you was worth whatever happens next." She spun back to face him, and now there was heat in her expression, actual emotion breaking through the years of careful control. "What happens next? What happens next is that my court thinks I've lost my mind. The Prime Minister is probably already drafting contingency plans for a Regency Council. Lady Kraith is telling everyone within range that the human soldier has more courage than sense, which is accurate. And you," she gestured at him helplessly, "you're standing there making jokes like you didn't just set fire to your entire career." "My career was getting shot at on planets I can't pronounce for causes I don't understand," Rennick said. "I've made peace with it." The Queen stared at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face like she was trying to read coordinates from a broken navigation display. Then, to his complete surprise, she reached up and began removing the platinum chains from her hair. The gesture was so unexpected, so intimate, that Rennick almost looked away. The chains came free one by one, chiming softly as she set them on a nearby pedestal with hands that weren't entirely steady. Her black hair fell loose around her shoulders, softening the sharp angles of her face, making her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. "Do you know what these chains mean?" she asked quietly. Rank? Authority? A really expensive headache? Burden, she corrected. They're forged from the crowns of the 7 realms I unified. Every morning I bind them into my hair to remind myself and everyone else what I carry. I haven't removed them in public in 3 years. Rennick understood suddenly the significance of what she'd just done. This wasn't the queen speaking to a soldier anymore. This was something else entirely. I am not a prize in my own ceremony, she said, her voice low and fierce. I am not chosen. I choose. I have ruled the fractured realms for 15 years. I survived the assassination attempt at my coronation when I was barely old enough to vote. I negotiated the Treaty of Singing Stars that everyone said was impossible. I ended the Corvian rebellion that killed 1/3 of my population, including my mother. Her hands clenched at her sides. I am not some reward to be pointed at like a carnival prize. I know, Rennick said simply. That stopped her. Then why? Because you needed to know someone saw the person, not the crown. The words came easier now, like he'd been holding them back for months and they finally had permission to escape. Because every time you stood alone on that observation deck at 3 in the morning, studying those same star charts like they'd reveal some secret if you looked hard enough, you weren't actually alone. I was there, watching, not guarding, just watching, and wondering who holds you up when you're holding up an entire realm. The queen went very still. Her long ears had tilted forward now, the position that meant intense listening, complete attention. You were watching me? Every time. You'd appear at 0300 hours like clockwork, always the same spot by the portside window, always the same charts. Sometimes you'd bring that terrible herbal tea that the galley synthesized. Sometimes you'd just stand there and stare at the stars like you were trying to navigate by them instead of the ship's computer. That's incredibly creepy, Soldier Vale. Yes, Your Majesty, but you smiled when you said it. She had smiled. It was small, barely a curve of her lips, but it transformed her face the way it always did when she forgot to be the queen for a moment and just existed as herself. You're absolutely insane. That's been suggested, yes. Usually right before I do something that works despite all logical probability. The queen moved closer, close enough that he could see the exact shade of her eyes, darker than the void between stars, but somehow warmer. Close enough to notice the way her ears shifted minutely with each breath. Close enough to be dangerous. This cannot work, she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. I am a queen. You are a soldier from a distant world, conscripted into a war you didn't choose. We have nothing in common except a few conversations over terrible coffee and worse tea, and a complete inability to sleep at normal hours, and a tendency to make tactical decisions that horrify our superiors but work anyway. And the fact that we both understand what it means to be alone in a crowd. Rennick kept his hands at his sides, didn't reach for her, didn't presume. And the way you laughed when I said the rebel commander clearly learned strategy from bad action hollows. That laugh, I'd never heard you laugh before. It was like discovering a new planet. Her expression shifted again, something raw and unguarded crossing her features. Stop! Stop what? Stop saying things that make me want impossible things. The queen turned away from him again, but this time she didn't move to the window. Instead, she paced, 3 steps in one direction, 3 steps back, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. Without the platinum chains, without the formal rigidity of court presence, she looked different. Smaller somehow, though no less formidable, just more real. Impossible things, she repeated almost to herself. Do you want to know what's impossible, Soldier Vale? Trusting anyone when 7 people have tried to kill you. Sleeping soundly when you know that every decision you make affects millions of lives. Connecting with another person when you can't tell if they see you or just the power you represent. I see you drinking synthesized coffee at 3 in the morning and making faces at star charts, Rennick said. I see you rubbing your temples when the Prime Minister talks for more than 10 minutes straight. I see you doing that thing with your ears when you're trying not to laugh at something inappropriate during tactical briefings. The queen stopped pacing and stared at him. What thing with my ears? They tilt forward slightly and then you force them back. It's subtle. I only noticed because I spent 6 months studying alien physiology after I got assigned to this sector and realized I couldn't read anyone's body language. You studied? She seemed caught between outrage and something else. You've been analyzing my ear movements? In my defense, they're very expressive ears. Also, I had a lot of downtime between getting shot at. A laugh escaped her, unexpected and genuine. She tried to catch it, pressing her hand to her mouth, but it was too late. The sound filled the observatory, echoing off the crystalline dome and somehow making the starlight seem warmer. When she lowered her hand, she was shaking her head. This is absurd. I'm standing here discussing my ear movements with a soldier who just committed political suicide by pointing at me. When you put it that way, it does sound strange, Rennick admitted. But I'd argue that most of the best moments in my life have been absurd. Like that time on your flagship when the gravity generators failed during a combat maneuver and we all ended up floating. You grabbed onto a support beam with one hand and caught me with the other before I cracked my head open on a bulkhead. That was protocol. I would have done that for any crew member. You laughed while you did it. You said, and I quote, "Perhaps the rebels are doing us a favor. Floating is much easier than standing." The Queen's expression softened at the memory. The engineering team was furious. They'd been working triple shifts and didn't appreciate my humor. But you still said it. That's what I'm talking about. Under all the protocol and chains and burden, there's a person who makes terrible jokes during crisis situations. That's the person I chose. She moved closer to him now, close enough that he could see the subtle variations in her skin tone, the way the starlight caught the silver undertones. Her long ears were fully forward, that complete attention posture that made him feel like he was the only thing in her universe at that moment. "Tell me something," she said quietly. "When did you decide? When did you look at your queen and think, yes, I'm going to destroy my career for this person?" Rennick considered the question seriously. "The rebel ambush, when that plasma bolt came in and I tackled you. Time does this strange thing in combat. Everything slows down but speeds up simultaneously. In that stretched second, I realized two things. First, that I was absolutely going to take that hit if it meant you didn't. And second, that the reason wasn't duty or orders or protocol. It was because the thought of you not existing in the universe anymore was intolerable." The Queen's breath caught. "That's insane, yes. We've established that. But true." She reached up, her hand moving slowly, like she was giving him time to step back, and touched his face. Her fingers were cool against his skin, trembling slightly. "You know what the worst part of this is? The political fallout? The scandal? The fact that Scholar Vane is probably writing a dissertation about us right now? The worst part is that you're right." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Every morning at 300 hours, I'd go to that observation deck knowing you'd be there. I told myself it was coincidence, that our schedules just aligned. But I'd been adjusting my schedule, making excuses to check the tactical displays on that deck specifically. Bringing that terrible tea because you once mentioned you couldn't sleep and neither could I. And maybe shared insomnia was better than the solo kind." Rennick felt something settle in his chest, a tension he hadn't known he was carrying finally releasing. "So we're both insane." "Apparently." She didn't remove her hand from his face. "I am a queen of the fractured realms. I unified 7 warring territories. I survived my mother's assassination and my own coronation attempt. I negotiated treaties that people said were impossible. I ended a rebellion that nearly destroyed everything. And now I'm standing here, chains removed, telling a human soldier that I've been orchestrating accidental meetings at 3 in the morning because his presence made the universe feel less heavy. That's definitely going in Scholar Vane's paper." The Queen laughed again, and this time she didn't try to stop it. "You're going to make jokes until the moment they execute you, aren't you? I figure if I'm going down, I might as well make it entertaining. Besides, you keep laughing, and I've decided that sound is worth a court-martial." Her expression shifted, something determined settling over her features. Her ears pulled back, not in distress but in decision. "What if I told you there might be a way to avoid the execution? I'm listening, though I should mention that if it involves me pretending this never happened and choosing one of the noble women, I'm going to have to decline. I'm committed to this particular brand of career suicide now." "What if?" she said slowly, her dark eyes locked on his. "The Queen chose to accept your choice?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Outside the observatory, Cythera's three moons continued their alignment, the light shifting from silver to something almost golden as they reached their perfect convergence. The bioluminescent plants on the surface below pulsed in rhythm, like the moon itself had a heartbeat. That would be, Rennick said carefully, unprecedented. I've built a career on unprecedented decisions. Her hand was still on his face, thumb tracing the line of his jaw. What's one more? The Queen's hand slipped from Rennick's face and she stepped back, her bare feet carrying her toward the edge of the observatory where the window met the floor. She knelt there, graceful despite the heavy fabric of her gown, and pressed her palm against the transparent surface. Below, Cythera's rust-colored landscape pulsed with the rhythm of bioluminescent life. Do you know why I chose this moon for the palace? She asked. Rennick moved closer, but didn't kneel, sensing she needed the moment to think. Strategic location? Defensible position? Good view? Because it's broken, she said simply. Cythera split from its parent planet 3 million years ago during a gravitational catastrophe. The models say it should have shattered completely, become an asteroid field, scattered itself across this system until nothing remained. But it didn't. It held together. It survived. And then, impossibly, life found a way to grow here anyway. She gestured to the glowing plants below. Those shouldn't exist. The moon's core is dying. The magnetic field is weak. Radiation should have sterilized the surface. But they adapted. They found a way. You're comparing yourself to a doomed moon with stubborn plants? She glanced back at him, and there was something almost mischievous in her expression. I'm comparing us to a doomed moon with stubborn plants. We're both impossible, and we're both here anyway. Rennick knelt beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. That's either very romantic or very depressing. I can't decide which. It can be both. She looked down at her hands at the faint scars on her fingers from years of combat training before she became queen. I need to tell you something about why I really offered you this choice, why the ceremony happened at all. I assumed it was political. Bind a useful asset to the court through marriage, create loyalty through personal connection, standard manipulation. Yes, that's exactly what it was. She didn't flinch from the admission. After you saved my convoy, the Prime Minister suggested it. She said you demonstrated loyalty beyond duty, that you were clearly competent, that binding you formally would prevent other factions from recruiting you. It was calculated, cold, efficient. Sounds about right for palace politics. But that's not why I agreed to it. The Queen's voice dropped. I agreed because I'm a coward, Rennick. I agreed because I knew if I put you in front of 3 beautiful, accomplished, eligible women and told you to choose, you'd do the reasonable thing. You'd pick one of them. You'd marry into the court. You'd be nearby but safely attached to someone else. And I could stop lying to myself about why I kept adjusting my schedule to be on that observation deck at 3 in the morning. Rennick processed this. So you were hoping I'd choose someone else? I was counting on it. She finally looked at him fully, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears if queens cried. I was creating a situation where I could keep you close, but not too close, where I could see you in the palace corridors and tell myself I was happy you'd found someone, where I could bury whatever this is under layers of duty and protocol until it stopped hurting. That's possibly the worst plan I've ever heard, and I once watched a commander try to use plasma grenades underwater. A sound escaped her that was half laugh, half sob. I know. I knew it was terrible even as I was doing it. But I've ruled for 15 years by making the hard choices, the smart choices, the choices that put my realm before my own wants. I thought I could do it one more time. What changed? You pointed at me. She shook her head, a gesture of wonder and exasperation combined. You absolute fool. You pointed right at me in front of my entire court and chose the one option that wasn't an option. And the look on your face, you weren't being clever or strategic or trying to manipulate the situation. You just chose honestly, like it was the simplest thing in the universe. It was simple, Rennick said. Everyone else in that room was a stranger. You're the person who shares terrible coffee with me at 3 in the morning. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the bioluminescent landscape below. When she spoke again, Her voice carried a weight that made Rennick understand why people followed her, why she'd unified 7 realms. I need to tell you what this would mean. Really mean. Not the romantic version, the actual version. I'm listening. The court will fight this. Not openly. They're too smart for that. But through 1,000 small resistances. Questions about your competence, your background, your motives. They'll scrutinize every decision you make, every word you speak. Some will assume you're manipulating me for power. Others will think I've lost my ability to rule objectively. The Prime Minister will create contingency plans. The military will question my judgment. Sounds exhausting. It will be. There will also be formal protocols. You'd need to learn 7 different court languages, master the etiquette of each unified realm, understand political dynamics that people spend lifetimes studying. You'd attend functions where people smile at you while calculating how to remove you. You'd make decisions that affect millions of lives with incomplete information and no room for error. Is there a benefits package? Dental? Retirement plan? She turned to stare at him. I'm trying to explain the nightmare you'd be walking into, and you're asking about dental? Well, I'd like to keep my teeth if I'm going to be smiling through all that political backstabbing. The Queen pressed her hand to her forehead. You're genuinely not taking this seriously. I'm taking it very seriously, Rennick corrected. I just also happen to think that if we can't laugh about the absurdity of a common soldier courting a queen, we're probably not going to survive the reality of it. Humor is a coping mechanism. Also, your ears just did the thing again. What thing? The trying not to laugh thing. They went forward and then you forced them back. She touched one ear self-consciously. I hate that you've noticed that. I notice everything about you. It's possibly creepy, but also apparently mutual, given that you've been orchestrating observation deck meetings for months. That was different. That was just wanting to see someone who didn't expect anything from me except maybe conversation and coffee. And this is different how? The Queen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, she said, because now it's real. Because if I say yes to this, if I actually accept your choice, I'm not just acknowledging my own feelings. I'm betting my entire reign on the possibility that a human soldier and an alien queen can make something impossible work. Lucky for you, I specialized in impossible things. Rennick offered her his hand. And before you ask, yes, I understand the politics. Yes, I know it will be difficult. Yes, I'm aware that half your court wants me dead, and the other half wants to study me like an interesting specimen. Yes, I know I'll probably mess up protocols and accidentally insult someone important and create diplomatic incidents. But here's what I also know. You laugh at my terrible jokes. You make faces at star charts. You've survived 7 assassination attempts and still choose to trust people. You unified 7 warring realms and somehow kept your empathy intact. And you've been just as lonely as I have, looking for someone who sees the person instead of the position. She stared at his extended hand like it was a grenade. If I take your hand, everything changes. Good, I'm tired of everything staying the same. The Queen looked at Rennick's extended hand for what felt like an eternity compressed into seconds. Above them, the 3 moons reached their perfect alignment, the point where their orbital paths created a moment of gravitational harmony that only occurred once every 17 standard months. The bioluminescent plants below pulsed in response, their light intensifying until Cythera's surface glowed like a living constellation. She placed her hand in his. The contact was electric, not metaphorically, but literally, a small discharge of static that made them both flinch and then laugh at the same moment. Even the universe is trying to tell us this is a bad idea, she said, but she didn't let go. The universe has terrible judgment, Rennick replied, lacing his fingers through hers. Her skin was cool, her grip surprisingly strong. It put me on a transport to a moon I'd never heard of to fight in a war I didn't understand, and somehow that led here. I'm choosing to interpret that as cosmic endorsement. The Queen stood, pulling him up with her. Without the platinum chains, with her hair loose and her feet bare, she looked younger than her years. Not fragile, she'd never be that, but human in a way the formal trappings of power had hidden. I'm going to accept your choice, she said, each word deliberate. Publicly. Tomorrow I'll reconvene the court and announce that I've chosen to honor your selection, that I choose you as well. That's going to cause problems. Catastrophic ones." She smiled, and it was fierce and genuine, and slightly terrifying. "The Prime Minister will require sedation. The military commander will request a psychiatric evaluation. Scholar Vane will probably propose a research study. Lady Karaith will laugh herself sick. Diplomat Ashran will spend weeks calculating the political ramifications. And your people?" The Queen's expression shifted, became thoughtful. "My people loved my mother. She was charismatic, beloved, everything a ruler should be. When she died, they got me instead, younger, less experienced, trying desperately to hold together realms that wanted to tear themselves apart. I've spent 15 years proving I deserve this crown, proving I could make the hard choices, the smart choices, the choices that put them first. But somewhere in all that proving, I forgot that leadership isn't just about sacrifice. It's also about showing people that connection is possible, that trust can exist, that taking risks for something real is worth it." She looked down at their joined hands. "If a queen can choose honestly, maybe it gives permission for others to do the same. Maybe that's worth the political chaos?" Rennick squeezed her hand gently. "Or maybe you're just tired of being alone, and you're retroactively creating noble justifications for a selfish decision. That's okay too." She laughed, the sound echoing through the empty observatory. "You're going to be terrible at court politics. You're far too honest. I prefer to think of it as refreshingly direct. Also, I'm going to need a lot of help with those 7 court languages. I can barely manage standard fractured realm dialect without accidentally ordering someone's execution when I meant to ask for directions. That happened once, and it was to a vending machine. Still counts. The machine was very offended." The Queen pulled him closer until they were standing in the center of the observatory where all 3 moonbeams converged. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow I announce my decision. There will be chaos. The court will protest. We'll spend months navigating political disasters. You'll make embarrassing mistakes. I'll have moments where I question my sanity. We'll argue about things we don't understand about each other's cultures. You'll struggle with the isolation of palace life. I'll struggle with sharing power and trust after years of holding everything alone. You're really selling this. I'm being honest. It's going to be difficult and messy and complicated. But..." She reached up with her free hand and touched his face again, her long ears fully forward in that gesture of complete attention. "But when it's 3 in the morning and the weight of ruling gets too heavy, I'll know there's someone on the observation deck who doesn't need me to be the queen. Just me, and maybe that's enough to make all the rest survivable." "Just to be clear," Rennick said, "I'm still going to make terrible jokes at inappropriate times. I'm counting on it. Humor might be the only thing that gets us through the Prime Minister's inevitable lectures. And I'm probably going to accidentally cause diplomatic incidents. At least twice a month, I'm estimating. And your court is going to hate me for months, possibly years. Some of them, yes. Others will come around. Lady Karaith already likes you. Anyone brave enough to point at me in public earns her respect. Scholar Vane finds you academically fascinating. Diplomat Ashran will need time, but she appreciates bold strategy even when it horrifies her." Rennick pulled her closer until her forehead rested against his. "And you? What do you think of the soldier who committed career suicide by choosing you?" The Queen was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried none of the royal authority, none of the practiced control. It was just her, unguarded and honest. "I think he saw me when I'd forgotten anyone could. I think he made me laugh when I'd forgotten how. I think he risked everything for something impossible because he believed it was worth it. And I think," her voice caught, "I think I've been waiting 15 years for someone to choose me instead of my crown. And I'm terrified and grateful and possibly insane, but I'm choosing him back." The 3 moons completed their alignment overhead, the light shifting to a deep gold that made the observatory glow like the inside of a star. Below, Cythera's bioluminescent landscape pulsed in waves of light, the broken moon that had survived against all probability, that had found a way to sustain life despite every cosmic reason it shouldn't. "So we're doing this," Rennick said. "Soldier and queen. Impossible in here anyway." We're doing this." She smiled, and it transformed her face completely, made her look like someone who'd finally set down a burden she'd carried too long. "Though you're going to need a better title than soldier. The court will insist on proper forms of address. How about the idiot who pointed at the queen? Has a nice ring to it. I was thinking more like royal consort or possibly prince consort, depending on how we structure the... I like my version better. More honest." She kissed him then, quick and soft and tasting faintly of the herbal tea she'd been drinking before the ceremony. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "Tomorrow, everything changes. The court reconvenes. The political chaos begins. Real life starts. But tonight we're just two people who can't sleep at normal hours, standing under impossible moons on a broken moon that refused to shatter." Exactly. The queen, Isaline, he reminded himself, her name was Isaline, took his hand again and led him toward the observatory doors. "Come on, I know where they keep the terrible coffee. We have about 6 hours before I have to put those platinum chains back on and become the queen again. Let's not waste them." As they left the observatory, the three moons began to separate, their alignment ending as the universe continued its inevitable dance. But behind them, through the crystalline dome, the bioluminescent plants kept pulsing, kept growing, kept proving that impossible things could survive if they were stubborn enough. And somewhere in the palace, Scholar Vane was definitely already writing that paper.